Right. Good morning. My mic's on, I hope. Yes. Good morning. So we're gonna change gears a little bit now and do something a little different, which is talking about LEO constellations and satellites. So a very interesting time if you follow the news and follow the press. The constellation, we as an analyst talk about constellations a lot. Just to give you a data point, there are over 125 constellations currently proposed in LEO, low Earth orbit. An enormous number around communications, Earth observation, IoT, and others. That's why we say the LEO constellation wave that's here. Most are, in various stages. We have the benefit of having arguably one of the most high-profile LEO constellation players here, which is OneWeb, and Campbell here to talk to us. We don't have a lot of time, Campbell. I want to jump in. Can you give us first the update, really quickly? Who is OneWeb, and current status of the program, please?
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone this morning. It's a lovely event, and I think we're all delighted to be here. Speaking on behalf of OneWeb. OneWeb was created in 2012, and the element around giving internet connectivity to everyone in the world, wherever you are, and it wasn't dependent on geography. This was conceived by Greg Weiler, the founder of OneWeb. Where we are today, we will be launching 645 satellites over the next 18 months. We already have 6 in the sky. We'll launch another 35 from the 7th of February from Kazakhstan. We're hoping that we will have the full coverage and the service up and running by October 21. We're already looking at the Arctic service going live December of this year, and in Hawaii, here in Hawaii, we'll be able to look at testing services from early next year. So Hawaii will have full coverage, and no part of Hawaii will be remote. Every part of Hawaii will be fully connected, and that's the plan. In terms of funding, we are currently funded to the point 3.4 billion. We have a trajectory of what funding will be available over the next year. So we anticipate our service will go ahead and be fully launched and be ready for everyone who wants to use the service by October 21.
Okay. So Campbell, the question comes up often in this world, the non-satellite world specifically, of investment cost in going to LEO, the complexities of going to LEO. The satellites don't last as long. Collectively, it's more expensive. There are some very capable geo-performing satellites out there. Why LEO, and why? And talk about maybe closing the business case at those kinds of numbers you're talking about.
So I'm not from a satellite background. I'm from a telecoms background. I spent many decades with BT Global Services. I'm with Orange Business Services. So my background is not satellite. But what I saw in OneWeb was the LEO technology moving in to the telecommunications space. And I remember a number of years ago going back where customers were getting fiber for the first time into their premises, and what that unlocked to the enterprise space and the communities that they serve by having fiber connections. Well, OneWeb will be giving fiber from the sky, so the boundaries of terrestrial will be removed. The applications that enterprises require will be able to work fully with low latency and high speeds, never seen before. And in terms of the return of investment, to answer the question more directly, when I look at the cost of the satellites, we're producing 2 satellites a day from our production plant in Florida. These satellites are costing less than $1 million. So the dynamics of the cost of producing a satellite has dramatically reduced. Our payloading going up, where each launch has got a payload of 35 satellites. So the overall cost of deploying the constellation has dramatically fallen as well. So in principle, the dynamics are much cheaper in terms of the ROI for getting the network up and running, getting the global service in place than it was even 5 years ago.
Now, it's interesting, having discussions here in this audience, this environment, many still remember the heyday of LEO constellations that were promoted and never really went anywhere, and there's quite a bit of money spent, and the business case was tenuous. Is it about cost, availability? What makes it different now that's going to make this succeed?
Well, it's real. I think what makes a difference is we already have 6 satellites up. We've already done some exhaustive testing. As an example, we were able to run high-definition video from the satellites that are already up there. We were returning 400 megabits per second with a latency of less than 32 milliseconds. So it's lightning quick, just like fiber is.
It's about speed and availability. Because again, I think the industry has been dogged by it's too expensive, not high capacity enough, but latency is late. I mean, that's an arguing debate. You could talk to the companies in geo who say, well, latency is not as important. I mean, is that really one of the key selling points?
I think when you look at what the geostationary satellites currently offer and look at what LEO satellites will do differently, the ability to run applications will be a major differentiation between what geo can do today and what LEO can do tomorrow. But there's also a place for doing a hybrid solution between the two as well. So we think that there'll be many instances where LEO technology will be complementary to geo technology, where satellite technology currently is required and is necessary. LEO technology will complement that.
Interesting. So talking a bit about, moving quickly, the target markets. When OneWeb was conceived, there was a primary focus on B2C, so going to consumers, going to remote sites, and talking about a flat panel antenna, which in the satellite world tends to be the holy grail of low-cost, electronically steered, phased arrays. It seems like there's been a pivot, maybe in your business case, more enterprise focus. Is that correct, or can you talk a bit about the applications in the markets?
So the pivot from B2C, OneWeb was created around giving internet access for everyone who needs it and connecting the unconnected. And there's many parts of the world that we say people are unconnected, but they're not really unconnected. They're unconnected because of affordability, and that's two different things. So in terms of the community play, OneWeb still sees itself as connecting schools, telemedicine, and there's many examples where our vision for the future would look at connecting every school, no matter where it is, and giving the pupils in those schools access to the internet, access to information, connectivity to the rest of the world. And that will be game-changing for many, many communities and many, many countries that have been restricted because of that. But moving on to the enterprise space, when you move businesses such as banks and retailers and mining and gas, and look at how they are served just now by fiber cables or subsea cables, one could argue that actually from a sustainability point of view, you may well be better putting a LEO satellite in place rather than try to have a terrestrial fiber that perhaps takes a long time to deploy and perhaps could be damaging to the environment. So there's arguments to be said on both sides of that. And the ROI is actually much better. If we can deploy a dual parabolic or a compact ESA, which is a flat panel, within days, rather than perhaps an implementation that would take weeks and be very costly for the suppliers.
So the sweet spot then is you're not competing directly with fiber. Obviously, you see yourselves as a augmentation, a extension. I mean, how do you position relative to this world? So when we're connecting data centers, we're operating in the cloud, which there have been some great sessions on cloud connectivity. I'm curious how you. Is this just as satellites always played, filling the gaps, or what is it?
So again, we're not competing directly with fiber, but if you think around some of the more remote places, I was up in Alaska earlier this week, and there's some major implementations served by one single fiber. Now, diversity could play its part, so you would have the fiber as the primary connection and potentially a LEO technology as a diverse backup potential, and it means that when the fiber does go down, your applications will still remain up. They will still work. You'll not have to default to a much lower grade technology. So in that respect, we'd be complementing fiber in that instance. We'll never be bumping up against fiber in the metropolitan areas. That's not the intent. But where there's a geography or a terrain or a requirement that fiber cannot get to, then I think that's where LEO will play.
Okay, fair enough. Now, talking about this wave that we're themed here around, which is lots of satellites coming, thousands of satellites coming if you count the numbers, launches all the time, this year, next, onwards. There's a lot of capacity that will be in orbit. And so, looking at the competition, looking at the differentiating factors, looking the elephant too may or may not be in SpaceX and Starlink and others, launching very aggressively, a lot of capacity. Let's talk about differentiation in this space, because it seems like with Amazon launching a constellation, potentially there are others, very high profile. How is OneWeb differentiated? Is this just a first mover advantage, or is this what is it that you believe, and is there enough demand there for everybody, frankly?
I think the demand is there. I think the estimates for the market that that's addressable by LEO is $1 trillion. And that's the estimate for 2040. But even in 2020, the addressable market for what OneWeb can do is in excess of 50 billion. So we've got a big market to play on. Coming on to the point about competition, competition is good, competition is healthy, and there is differentiation between what OneWeb will do to what the other players will do. We cover the whole world. We don't stop short of the 60th parallel. We cover the whole world, and we'll do that very quickly, and we'll do that in 18 months. So yes, we have first mover advantage, but the other thing is around how we're differentiating in terms of the service packages that we're putting together. We're putting service packages that will dovetail into what enterprises, what maritime, government and defence will do. We're looking at how we can package those that are very similar to how traditional IT suppliers and telcos package services to those verticals. And we have segmented within OneWeb verticals that are absolutely geared to serving those markets.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because if you read the news and some of the constellations putting out quotes that, or projections in a decade's time, like a constellation in this world will generate 10+ billion annually, and in the satellite world that's enormous. When you have some of the biggest satellite companies, SES and others, generating 2+, 3 billion a year. I mean, it's an order of magnitude bigger. Are you convinced the demand is there? I mean, when I hear these same markets, energy, remote connectivity, these types of things, are you convinced that it will build?
I think the demand for capacity will not change, and I think the demand for capacity can only go one way. We all have smartphones, we all live in a connected world, or we think we do, but actually there's 4 billion people in the world that are not connected. There are 350 million children in the world who don't have access to the internet. So whilst we take our connectivity for granted a little bit, I know I do, the demand is there for the unconnected to be connected in a cost-effective way that's meaningful to their community and for the businesses that operate in their community. So in answer to your question, completely, I'm absolutely sure the demand is definitely there. Okay,
so functionally now, speaking of timing, you mentioned you're going to be launching several batches of satellites this year.
Indeed.
Timing for when you expect commercial availability is the first question, and then I'll have another question, but that first. When can we expect commercial availability? You mentioned Alaska. I assume that's probably one of your first market.
Yeah, so we've signed a global deal with Pacific Data in Hawaii, and we've signed a deal with Microcom in Alaska. So Alaska will be the first connected state, and round about the end of December of this year, we should be able to offer limited services covering Alaska. Now, the feedback from the people in Alaska who were delighted to hear this news, Alaska was always playing catch up in terms of technology. It was always catching up with the rest of the world. By December of this year, they'll be ahead. They'll be the most connected, Alaska will be the most connected state in the US. So you can see how LEO technology will really be shifting the dynamic. In terms of launches, we launched 7th of February, the next batch for 35, and then in consecutive months, we will continue at that rate of launches until we hit the 645. Service go live globally is October 21.
Okay. So then on the ground, it comes down to, and I would wager in the satellite world, space happens, right? We can launch satellites, but on the ground, it comes down to that's what's going to be the measure of success. You mentioned dual parabolics, which are just dishes tracking antennas that are moving. And then you talked about a flat panel, which I keep coming back to. This industry is really trying to solve that challenge. How far away are we from that?
The flat panel compact ESA, which is probably about the size of a pizza box and a half, will be available early 2022. We're already well down the track in terms of manufacturing and development and design. We've got some prototypes that we've already started to test. So 2022 is when you first start to see the compact ESAs that come out. And to be honest, when we look at the business model, we see the dual parabolics as being the first tranche of where services will be provided using those user terminals. But in actual fact, the volumetrics of the vast expansion in LEO acceptance and adoption will be done by using the compact ESAs.
So you expect the 2020, so in the meantime, you're launching traditional parabolics tracking and redundant, and
yeah.
et cetera.
We also have mobility UTs and other ones within government as well.
Okay. So. Now, OneWeb being not with onboard processing of communicating across the planes of satellites, you're constantly communicating to the ground. Can you walk us through functionally when you're over oceans, over other areas, how you envision that connectivity to happen when you're connecting 2 points? When you're bouncing signals up and down, I've seen simulations of Starlink and
the satellites actually track from north to south. So if you imagine the globe of the world, the satellites go around, I think they go around, they're all 109 minutes. So they circle the Earth every 109 minutes. We have 42 ground stations, and each of those ground stations are connected to high resilient POPs. So we're able to offer, for example, backhaul enterprise. So an enterprise can backhaul their traffic straight into the cloud. We'll be offering that as a service.
Okay. It's interesting when you start to factor in certain routing, and it's an interesting dilemma. Some depending on, again, every constellation is different because you have different planes, different altitudes, different elliptical versus others. So we only have about a minute and a half left, unfortunately. You come from the telecom world.
I do.
Which is great because satellite is ushering in this new era. You hear, we're not satellite companies anymore, we're telecom companies. What's the future look like? I mean, we're talking about constellations. What's the next step? We're launching a lot of capacity, but are we now going to be taken, I guess, I hate to say it, more seriously in this world? Is it we're now a viable, true option alongside everything else out there, given all of this hype and surrounding?
I think the characteristics of OneWeb is conservative. We're not shouting about things that we haven't yet delivered. We're really focusing on making sure our delivery is timely and it does what it says it does. In terms of the sustainability aspect, we are very, very focused on having a sustainable and responsible space program that makes sure that when the satellites re-enter, for example, they self-destruct, we're trying to make sure that we're responsible in space. And in terms of the community aspects of how I see the future, connecting schools, connecting hospitals, no matter how big, no matter how small, no matter where they are, that is the future. And LEO technology will undoubtedly play a significant part in helping the communities and the businesses that are completely unconnected just now in a completely different way with low latency and high speeds that they've not seen before, fiber from the sky.
Fascinating times. If you track the world, to build 2 satellites per day to understand where we've come through to get to that isn't in your factories. So I'd love an invite. We all would love an invite to your next launches. So please, can you join me in thanking Campbell? Great, thank you.
Thank you.